They say family is supposed to be your first foundation, the place where you learn love, support, and belonging. But sometimes, family can be the place where you first learn betrayal. My story starts in a small restaurant that smelled like fried onions, fresh bread, and warm memories. A place my parents built with their own hands, long before I was even born. The restaurant wasn't just a business. It was our identity, our history, and the thing that connected every member of the family. We didn't have expensive vacations or fancy traditions, but we had that kitchen, those tables, those customers who came in every Sunday like clockwork. I grew up watching my parents serve meals and smiles, believing one day I would also take my place in that legacy. I thought I was meant to be part of it. I was wrong. Or at least that's what they made me believe. Growing up, I was always the quiet one. Not slow, not lazy, just quiet. The kind of child who learned by observing instead of talking. My siblings were louder, more confident, always ready to jump in and help with customers. They made jokes, charmed people, and moved with the kind of boldness that looked like success. Me. I liked the behind-the-scenes work. Cleaning tables after hours, writing down inventory, organizing the storeroom so everything made sense. I didn't talk much, but I cared. I cared deeply. I thought everyone understood that. I thought everyone valued that. But sometimes what you give doesn't matter if no one bothers to look hard enough to see it. As the years passed, my parents got older. Their backs began to bend, and the hours felt heavier on their bodies. That's when the conversations about who will take over began. My siblings acted like this was a competition. They started showing up earlier, helping more, showcasing themselves like they were auditioning for a role. I stayed consistent though. I kept working the same way I always had because I believed effort was seen. I believed loyalty was remembered. I believed family meant fairness. The day they made the announcement, the restaurant was closed. The chairs were flipped upside down on the tables, and the golden evening sun slanted through the windows in a way I'll never forget. My mother was sitting down, which she rarely did during business hours. My father was pacing back and forth like something heavy was weighing on him. My siblings were smiling, whispering among themselves, confident and excited, like they already knew the ending of the story. I walked in and my heart already felt uneasy, like something was about to shift. My father cleared his throat and said, "We have decided how to divide the restaurant." Divide. The word itself felt wrong, like cutting into a living thing. One sibling got the kitchen management. Another got the financial and business control. Another got customer relations and staff oversight. Each of them received a part of the restaurant, a role that came with authority and pride. I waited. I waited to hear my name. I waited to hear my place. And then I heard the words that felt like a punch inside my chest. "You're not ready for any responsibility," my mother said softly, like softness would make it hurt less. "You're too quiet, too unsure, too slow. We don't want to burden you. This is for your own good." For my own good. That sounded like kindness, but it was cruelty wrapped in gentle tone. The air in the room felt small. My siblings didn't say anything at first, but the look in their eyes said everything. They had already accepted it. Maybe they even encouraged it. I tried to speak, but the words got stuck somewhere between my throat and my heart. All I could manage was, "So, what about me?" My father stopped pacing, looked at me, and said the sentence that has echoed in my mind ever since. "You will still be part of the family, but not the business. You're just not competent enough." The room fell silent. I remember the sound of the refrigerator humming. I remember my hands shaking. I remember trying not to cry, not because crying is weak, but because I didn't want them to think their words broke me, even though they did. After that day, everything changed. They still expected me to show up and help when they needed an extra pair of hands, but without recognition, without pay, without acknowledgement. Like I was invisible. Like I was just a shadow in the place that raised me. I left the restaurant one night and walked home in the dark. I didn't say anything, didn't yell, didn't argue. I just walked. But inside me, something ignited, not anger, but clarity. A realization that sometimes the people you expect to believe in you will be the first to doubt you. And if you want your place in this world, sometimes, you have to build it yourself. I didn't know exactly what I would do yet. I didn't have a plan or money or even support. But I had something stronger. I had the truth. I had the work ethic I'd developed all those years, even if they didn't see it. I had the patience no one appreciated. And I had the determination to prove that being quiet didn't mean being weak, being slow didn't mean being incapable, and being overlooked didn't mean being unworthy. This is the story of what happened next. The story of how I went from the sibling nobody believed in to the one they never expected to rise. But to understand that, you have to see what came after. Because what they didn't know was, I didn't just walk away broken. I walked away building something they would never see coming. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, hearing the words repeat in my mind like an echo that refused to fade. You're too incompetent. I kept wondering when they formed that conclusion. Was it a single mistake I made as a kid? Was it because I didn't speak as loudly as my siblings? Or was it simply easier to overlook the person who didn't demand attention? The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't something that started that day. It was something that had been quietly building for years. Small comments, quick dismissals, moments where I was passed over without explanation. And I had let it happen because I thought keeping peace was better than being seen as difficult. But silence has a way of making others think you agree with how they define you. The next morning the house felt different. It was like the air had gained weight. My siblings were cheerful, already talking about new menus, theme nights, business plans. They had excitement in their voices that sounded like triumph. I could feel their glances at me, light but sharp, as if they wanted to see how I would react. I didn't react. I just quietly made myself a cup of tea and sat at the table like I had every morning. But inside something was shifting. The version of me they believed in, the one who would always just accept, is the one that was slowly disappearing. I decided I needed space not just physically but emotionally. I started spending more time walking around the town. I'd sit in random cafes watching people work, talk, and build things. It was strange how many places were run by families, yet not every family functioned the same way. I noticed how some parents guided their children with patience, while others hovered with pressure. I noticed how some siblings supported each other effortlessly, while others competed like the whole world was a scoreboard. And watching them made me question, had I mistaken familiarity for love? Just because you share blood doesn't mean you share respect. One day, I found myself in a small cafe at the edge of the town that I had never been to before. It was quiet, cozy, a bit old-fashioned, with wooden chairs that creaked when you sat and walls filled with handwritten notes from customers. The owner was an older woman with soft eyes and hands that looked like they had kneaded dough for decades. She watched me sit alone and offered me a warm smile. Not the kind you give customers because you have to, but the kind that comes from seeing someone who is trying to hold themselves together. You look like someone who thinks too much, she said, placing a cup of tea in front of me. I didn't deny it. I just nodded. Thinking is useful, she continued, but sometimes it keeps you stuck where you already know you don't belong. Her words hit deeper than she probably intended. And maybe I needed to hear them from a stranger because hearing them from family was never an option. I found myself returning to that cafe almost every day. Not because I liked the tea, though it was good, but because it gave me a place where I didn't feel watched or judged. It gave me space to think, to breathe, to imagine something beyond the restaurant. I started to think about what I wanted, not what my family expected. What did I enjoy? What made me feel capable? The answer surprised me. I loved the small details of running a business. The structure, the planning, the inventory, the quiet behind-the-scenes work that holds everything together. I loved creating systems and organizing things so they made sense. I wasn't incompetent. I just didn't shine in the same way my siblings did. And there is more than one kind of talent in the world. But realization alone changes nothing. What mattered was what I did next. At the cafe, I began helping out, not in a formal way. I just noticed if something needed doing. If a shelf was messy, I fixed it. If a delivery arrived, I helped carry it in. I reorganized the pantry one afternoon, and the owner noticed how efficient everything was afterward. You've got an eye, she said. Not everyone does. Those words felt so simple, yet they meant something I hadn't heard in a long time: recognition. One evening, she invited me to sit with her while she went over her notebooks. The cafe wasn't doing well financially. She had loyal customers but not enough of them. She struggled with bookkeeping and cost control. She confessed she had been thinking about closing soon. Without even thinking, I offered to help. Not because I wanted anything from her, but because I understood what it meant to lose a place you had poured your heart into. She agreed, and over the next few weeks I started working with her, quietly, steadily, piece by piece. I tracked expenses, compared prices from suppliers, redesigned the ordering process to reduce food waste. I created small changes that didn't look impressive from the outside, but they mattered. And slowly the cafe started to stabilize. The owner began trusting me more. She let me try new menu board layouts, reorganize seating to create a more welcoming flow, and even plan a small weekend promotion event. People started noticing the cafe again, not because of flashy advertisement but because the place began to feel cared for. Word spreads quietly in a small town. And eventually my family heard. One evening my sister walked into the cafe. She didn't say hello. She didn't even look around. She looked straight at me with a mixture of confusion and irritation. "So this is what you've been doing," she said. I didn't respond. I just kept wiping down the counter. She continued, "Mom and Dad think you're being childish. You should come back. We need extra hands because business has increased." Meet. When they needed something from me, they remembered I existed. I looked up for the first time. My voice was calm when I said, "I'm busy here." Her expression changed. Surprise. Slight disbelief. Maybe even annoyance. "We're family," she said as if that was enough. I didn't argue. I just said, "I know." She left without saying more. But her visit wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning of something I could feel building quietly, like a storm that hasn't formed yet but is already in the air. Because once my parents found out that I was helping run another cafe, especially one that was starting to gain attention, they didn't react with pride. They reacted with something else entirely. And that reaction would change everything. My mother didn't come to the cafe right away. She waited. That's how she had always handled uncomfortable situations. She liked to let things simmer, giving the illusion of peace while she decided how she wanted the narrative to look. My father, however, reacted in small ways first. I noticed it when I visited home for dinner one evening. There was a chill in the air, an unspoken tension. My siblings spoke softly among themselves, glancing at me like I was someone new, someone suspicious. My mother kept stirring her spoon around her tea without drinking it. My father kept his eyes on his plate. No one mentioned the cafe. But everything was about the cafe. Finally, as we were finishing dinner, my father leaned back in his chair. He didn't raise his voice, but the tone was sharp in a way that cut quietly. "We heard you've been involved elsewhere." Those words made it sound like I had committed a crime. I set my fork down and answered honestly, "I'm helping out at a cafe. That's all." My siblings shifted in their seats. My mother finally spoke, her voice calm but heavy. "Why didn't you just come back to the restaurant? You know we still need hands. You know you could have helped here." Help. Not belong. Not led. Not matter. Just help. I looked around the table and saw what I had been missing for years. They didn't think I lacked ability. They simply never took the time to understand what I was good at. They had decided a version of me long ago and expected me to live inside it forever. "I am helping," I said softly. "Just somewhere I'm allowed to." My brother scoffed. "Allowed to? Seriously? You're acting like we kept you locked in the basement." No one laughed. Not even him. My father looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. It wasn't anger. It was something more dangerous. Disappointment mixed with ownership. "We built that restaurant for our family," he said. "Not for outsiders." And there it was. The conflict beneath everything. In their eyes, helping another business was betrayal. Loyalty meant staying where they placed me, even if I disappeared inside those walls. I left that night knowing something heavy had shifted between us. It wasn't a fight, but the quiet kind of break that hurts more than yelling ever could. Back at the cafe, life moved forward, but I carried that conversation with me like a stone in my pocket. The owner noticed the tension in my eyes even when I didn't mention it. She didn't pry. She simply made space for me to breathe. Meanwhile, the cafe continued to grow. Regular customers turned into familiar faces. They'd greet me by name, ask how I was doing, and talk to me like I mattered. I had never realized how rare that feeling had become in my home. One afternoon, during a slow hour, I overheard two customers talking at a nearby table. They were discussing my family's restaurant. Not the cafe. What? Well, there's the place that used to feel like an extension of my own heartbeat. "Service has been weird lately," one of them said. "Feels like they're trying too hard. The warmth is gone." I pretended not to hear, but their words settled into me. The restaurant was struggling in a way I knew too well. They were so focused on being impressive, on controlling every moment, that they were losing the thing that made. The two customers didn't know I was listening, and maybe that made their words hit even harder. They weren't speaking with judgment, just honesty. The same honesty my family was too proud to face. The restaurant used to have warmth. Now it had performance. The smiles weren't real anymore, they were practiced. The laughter was rehearsed. Even the food felt like it had lost its soul. And I knew why. When something becomes about proving yourself instead of loving what you do, everything changes. But even with that knowledge, I didn't feel satisfied. There was no feeling of victory. Just sadness. That restaurant was part of my life. It held memories I still carried in my bones. I wanted it to survive. I just no longer wanted to shrink myself to fit inside it. Days went by and the tension at home only got heavier. My parents asked fewer questions and gave more silent looks. My siblings kept trying to play polite while clearly waiting for me to admit I was wrong. They thought I was being emotional. They thought I would eventually come crawling back when the cafe became too hard for me. They didn't understand that it was never about easy or hard. It was about breathing. Then news started spreading faster. The cafe was getting attention online. Customers posted pictures of the cozy layout, the small menu specials, and the comfortable atmosphere. People mentioned how the vibe felt familiar, welcoming, not flashy, not forced. Someone wrote, "It feels like a place that remembers you." That's what I wanted. That's what I had tried to give at the restaurant. And it was happening here. But success invited pressure. One evening, the cafe was unusually busy. The customer line stretched almost to the door, and the air smelled like fresh bread and cinnamon sugar. I was at the counter taking orders quickly but calmly, keeping everything flowing. Then I saw them, my siblings. All three of them standing together near the entrance, watching. Not one of them tried to smile. They waited until the rush slowed and customers cleared out before they approached. My eldest sister spoke first. She didn't bother with greetings. "You're using what you learned at the restaurant," she said. I didn't respond. It wasn't a question. My brother stepped closer. "You learned everything from our parents. And now you're giving it to someone else." There it was. They didn't care that I was thriving. They didn't care that I had finally found a place I fit. They cared that I no longer fit where they wanted me to stay. The owner stood behind the counter, observing quietly. She didn't interrupt. She didn't need to. This was my battle. "I helped build that restaurant too," I said calmly. "I didn't take anything. I just didn't stop existing because you said I wasn't good enough." My sister crossed her arms. "You're overreacting. We didn't say that to hurt you. We were thinking about what's best." Best for who? Best for what? They didn't say it, but the meaning was loud enough to feel. Best for the image. Best for the control. Best for the roles they had already assigned. I looked at them, really looked, and realized something important. They didn't think I had changed. They thought I was temporary. That this version of me, the confident one, the one standing firm, was just a phase I would eventually grow tired of. They still believed they held my story in their hands. "I'm not coming back," I said. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just real. My brother's jaw tightened. My sister's eyes narrowed. My younger siblings stepped back like they suddenly understood this conversation wasn't going to end the way they expected. "We'll see," my eldest said before they turned and walked out. And I knew they weren't done. Not by a long shot. Because this wasn't just family conflict anymore. It had become something deeper. Something they couldn't admit, control slipping from their fingers. Weeks passed, and while the cafe grew more stable, the restaurant grew more chaotic. Customers talked. Employees whispered. My siblings tried new strategies every other day, discounts, flashy promos, new uniforms, anything to shift attention back. But none of it brought back what they lost when they pushed me away. The warmth couldn't be recreated with a marketing plan. Then one morning my mother came to the cafe. She didn't speak immediately. She just sat down at a table, hands folded, staring at nothing. I sat across from her. We didn't talk for a long time. Finally she said, "I didn't realize you were unhappy." The words were soft, sincere even. But they came too late. "I wasn't unhappy," I replied. "I just didn't fit into the version of me you wanted." She swallowed hard. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. She was too practiced for that. Too strong. Too proud. "You could still come back," she said. "We can fix this." I wanted to say yes. A part of me still wanted to be wanted. Still wanted to belong. Still wanted to feel like family meant safety. But I couldn't go back to being invisible just to keep everyone comfortable. "I need to build something of my own," I said. My mother didn't argue. But the silence that followed was heavier than any shouting could have been. She left without finishing her coffee. Things escalated after that. Soon, suppliers stopped returning the cafe owner's calls. Orders came late. Ingredients were suddenly out of stock. The cafe struggled. Not enough to shut down, but enough to hurt. The owner didn't blame me. But she didn't need to. I could see the worry in her tired eyes. And I knew exactly where the pressure was coming from. My family still believed I was someone who would quietly bend. They didn't understand that once a person learns to breathe on their own, they never forget how. But the real turning point came on a night I will never forget. The cafe hosted a small evening event, a simple open mic night. People laughed, shared stories, sang softly under warm lights. The place felt alive in a way that can't be staged. Then, in the middle of all that peace, the restaurant's new manager, my eldest sibling, walked in with a clipboard and a look that could freeze fire. "I need to talk to you," she said. And the way she said it made my chest tighten. This was not a conversation. This was the moment everything would break. The air felt like it was holding its breath. Everyone around us kept talking, unaware that two worlds were about to collide in the middle of a small cafe. She leaned closer, voice low, steady, dangerous. "You need to stop. Right now. Before you ruin everything." And in that moment, I realized something. They weren't afraid of losing me. They were afraid of me proving they were wrong. The night held its breath. Everything was about to change. The room felt too still after she said those words. Her voice didn't shake, and that was what made it so unsettling. She wasn't warning me out of fear or worry. She was warning me because something had already been set into motion. I looked at her, trying to understand what she meant without asking, because I knew if I asked, the answer might be something I couldn't undo. "What do you mean?" I finally asked, keeping my voice steady. She didn't blink. "The restaurant is being evaluated. We're preparing for expansion, possibly franchising. Investors are watching everything right now. You working here makes us look divided, unprofessional, chaotic. Expansion, franchising, investors." It sounded like something to be proud of. Something big. Something worth celebrating. But I knew my family well enough to understand the truth behind the excitement. This wasn't about growth. This was about reputation. They were afraid I would prove I didn't need them. And investors seeing that would ruin the image that the siblings were a unified, successful team. "So what do you want?" I asked quietly. Her eyes narrowed, not out of anger but out of certainty. "We need you to leave this cafe. Stop working here. Walk away before this turns into something bigger than you can handle. Bigger than I can handle." Those words lingered in my head. The same tone my father used when he said I wasn't capable. The same tone that had followed me all my life. I didn't respond immediately. I just looked at her. And for the first time I didn't see my sister. I saw someone who was protecting a throne she believed belonged only to her. Then the cafe owner walked over. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't demand anything. She simply placed her hand on my shoulder. "Is there a problem here?" My sister glanced at her, then back at me. "There will be," she said. And then she left. The cafe felt different after that. The warm lighting didn't feel as warm. The laughter from the open mic stage felt distant. People kept enjoying their night, but I felt like someone had quietly opened a door to a storm we weren't ready for. And then the second twist came, not from my family but from the cafe owner herself. A few nights later, after we closed, she asked me to sit with her in the back near the old wooden counter that always smelled like ground coffee. Her expression was gentle but serious. "I need to tell you something," she said. I nodded, waiting. "This cafe is not actually mine," she admitted. "I manage it. I've been managing it for years. But the building, the business rights, the property, they belong to someone else. Someone who may be willing to sell." For a moment I didn't understand. Then it hit me. She wasn't telling me to worry. She was opening a door. A door I didn't expect. A door I wasn't sure I was ready for. She looked at me with those soft, steady eyes. "You helped this place come back to life," she said. "You care about it. You understand it. And I'm getting older. I can't run this forever. But you could." My heart stopped. Not from excitement. From fear. Me? Own a business? Not just work behind the scenes, but lead it? Everything my family said I couldn't do. This was the exact opposite. "I know what your family said to you," she continued, her voice gentle. "But you don't have to let them be right." I stared at the wooden counter, at my own hands resting on it. The same hands they said weren't capable. The same hands that had quietly built systems, organized shelves, calmed chaos. The same hands that never shook when working, only when trying to speak. I didn't answer right away. I didn't know if my hesitation was fear or loyalty or both tangled together. But before I could speak, the cafe door suddenly rattled. Someone was outside. The lights were on but the sign said closed. The owner and I exchanged a glance. She stood up slowly and moved toward the front. And when she unlocked the door just enough to see who was there, my father stood on the other side. Not yelling. Not emotional. Not angry. Just silent. And silence from him was always the loudest warning. "We need to talk," he said. I felt my entire chest tighten. Because his presence didn't just mean concern. It meant something bigger. Something final. Something had shifted in the restaurant. Or in him. Or maybe in the entire family. Whatever he came to say that night, I already knew it was going to change everything. My father stepped inside the cafe and closed the door behind him. The sound was small, but it felt heavy, like the moment a judge picks up a gavel before speaking. I stood there, not sure whether to move closer or stay where I was. The cafe owner stayed near the counter, giving us space but not leaving. My father looked around slowly, as if trying to understand the place that had taken his incompetent child and given them a sense of purpose. He didn't speak right away. And in the silence, all the years of working in the restaurant, cleaning tables late at night, waiting for someone to notice me, rose in my chest. Finally he said, "The restaurant is falling apart." The words hit harder than anger ever could. I didn't ask him why. I already knew. When something is built on ego more than heart, when decisions are made to prove something instead of preserve something, it begins to crumble. The warmth had left the restaurant the same day they told me I didn't belong. My father slowly sat at one of the small cafe tables, the one near the window where the afternoon sun usually hit. Now, the streetlights outside flickered across his face, making him look tired in a way I hadn't seen before. "I thought keeping everything organized meant assigning roles," he said. "Your siblings have strong personalities. I believed giving them leadership would keep the restaurant alive. And I didn't fit the picture," I said quietly, finishing the sentence he didn't know how to say. He closed his eyes for a moment. "I didn't see you. Not really. You were always working, always helping so quietly." I mistook silence for weakness. I didn't respond. There are some words you wait your entire life to hear, and when they finally come, they don't erase the years. They only reveal them. My father took a slow breath. "Investors visited last week. They said the restaurant lacked structure, consistency, and..." He stopped, like the next word was too painful to admit. "They said it lacked trust among the family members." I felt something inside me shift. The restaurant wasn't struggling because I left. It was struggling because the foundation had cracked long before that. He looked at me, then really looked at me. Not as the quiet child. Not as the extra pair of hands. But as someone who had built something lasting. Something he could no longer deny. "The cafe is succeeding because of you. I can see that." For a moment it felt like the world paused. I didn't know whether to feel relief, sadness, or something deeper. Then he said the words I didn't expect. "We want you back. Not to help. Not to assist. To lead." My heart stopped. What? The role they gave to 3 others before even considering me? The place they told me I wasn't good enough for? My father continued, "Your siblings are struggling. They cannot run the restaurant the way you can. I was wrong not to see your strength. We need you." The cafe owner watched me silently, like she already knew this moment was coming. I thought about the restaurant, the warm light, the regular customers, the history, the memories. I also thought about the cafe, the quiet mornings, the comfortable laughter, the space where I finally learned to breathe. For the first time I realized something. I didn't have to choose based on fear. I could choose based on who I had become. I took a deep breath. "I'll come back," I said. My father's shoulders loosened, relief washing over him. "But on one condition." He waited. "I don't want a role you hand to me. I want to rebuild it my way. No controlling, no deciding for me, no silencing my voice." My father nodded slowly. "Then it will be yours." We shook hands, not as parent and child, but as 2 people rebuilding something broken. The next weeks were intense. I stepped into the restaurant, not as the overlooked sibling, but as the person responsible for restoring its heart. I changed the menu back to the original recipes. I brought back the open kitchen, warm greetings. I trained staff not to perform but to connect. Slowly, customers returned. Not for discounts, but for comfort, familiarity, and authenticity. My siblings didn't take it easily at first. There was tension, silence, and long stares. But they saw the changes. They saw customers smiling again. They saw the warmth return. Eventually, the resistance softened into cooperation. Not perfect, but real. The restaurant began to breathe again. But just when everything seemed like it had found balance, the cafe owner called me in one evening. She had the official sale papers in her hand. "I never intended to sell this place to just anyone," she said. "The offer still stands. You can own the cafe. You don't have to choose between spaces. You can grow both." My heart raced. 2 places. 2 homes. 2 legacies. For the first time in my life, I wasn't being told what I couldn't do. I was being asked what I wanted to do. And just as I was about to answer, the cafe door opened. My eldest sibling stepped inside. But this time she didn't come with anger. She came with tears. "We want to help," she said quietly. "All of us. If you'll let us." The story didn't end with me proving them wrong. It ended with them finally seeing me. But what I chose next, That's another story. One where I finally learned. Being quiet never meant being weak. It meant I was listening. And now, everyone else was too. When the crowd finally settled down and the last customer left our grand reopening night, I stood in the quiet restaurant with the lights dimmed low. The smell of grilled spices, warm bread, and roasted vegetables was still in the air. The tables were cleaned, the chairs neatly aligned, and the sign outside glowed softly with the new name I had chosen. My own name. My identity. The identity they once said I didn't deserve. I just stood there in silence for a long time, letting the reality sink in. This place wasn't just a restaurant anymore. It was proof that I was never really too incompetent, or not good enough. It was proof that I could build something meaningful on my own terms. All the pain, the arguments, the planning, and the long nights had led to this very moment. I could still remember how everything had felt just a few days earlier, when the tension with my siblings had reached its height. They didn't stop by to congratulate me. They didn't send a message. They didn't even like the announcement post online when I uploaded it. And honestly, I had expected that. But there was still a part of me that hoped they would show up, even if only to see what I had made. Even if only to see me as something more than the weak one they kept in the background. But the doorway stayed empty. The bell never rang. I knew there was still unresolved hurt between us, but I also knew I couldn't let that hold me back anymore. Over the following days, something interesting began to happen. Word spread about the restaurant faster than I expected. People came in not only for the food but for the story behind it. They wanted to see the place built by the sibling who was cast aside. They respected how I didn't turn my back on tradition. I honored our family recipes while adding my own touches. There was pride in every meal that left the kitchen. I made sure of it. I spent time greeting customers, learning their names, remembering their favorite flavors. The restaurant grew not because of some revenge plot or competition, but because it finally had heart again. My heart, my voice, my identity poured into every detail. One afternoon, I was wiping down the counter when I saw the front door slowly open. At first, I thought it was just another customer. But when I looked up, I froze. It was my oldest brother. The one who had stood at the center of everything. The one whose words cut the deepest that day they handed out the restaurant shares. He didn't walk in confidently like he used to. His steps were slower, more cautious. His eyes scanned the room as if looking for pieces of the past. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us felt heavy. He finally walked up to the counter. "You did this," he said quietly, his voice tired. "You really did this." I nodded, not sure what to say. I didn't want anger to rise again. I didn't want to reopen wounds. I had moved past that and I didn't want to go back. He took a deep breath and leaned his hands against the counter. "We haven't been doing well at the old place," he admitted. "The customers, they left. The staff is frustrated. The energy is gone. Everyone keeps saying the food tastes the same, but it doesn't feel the same. And I think we all know why." I stayed silent. Let him talk. We thought running a restaurant was just about managing money and assigning positions. But we forgot what made people choose us in the first place. We forgot the heart. We forgot the care you had. The thing we used to take for granted. His voice cracked just slightly. "We were wrong. About you. About everything." I swallowed hard. I wasn't expecting this conversation. I wasn't prepared for it. I didn't know if I was supposed to forgive him, challenge him, or simply listen. But I knew it mattered. He looked around again, taking in the space. "This place feels alive. It feels real." There was a long pause. Then he said the words I never thought I would hear. "We miss you." My chest tightened. Not because I wanted to go back. I didn't. I had found something better, not just success but peace. But hearing those words felt like something that had been broken for years finally loosened. I walked around the counter and stood in front of him. "I didn't build this place to compete with any of you," I said softly. "I built it because I needed a place where I could believe in myself again. A place where I mattered." He nodded, his eyes lowered. "I know. We weren't suddenly healed. We didn't hug and cry. We didn't forgive everything in one instant. Healing isn't a scene, it's a process. But we started talking, slowly, respectfully. He came back the next day. And the next. Eventually, one of my other siblings visited. Then the last one. Not all together. One at a time. Small steps. We never went back to being the same family we were before. But in some ways, maybe we became better. We learned how to respect each other, not compare. How to listen, not assume. How to let each person grow without holding them to old versions of themselves. The old restaurant didn't close, though it did change. My siblings began to reinvent their approach, adding their own touches instead of trying to recreate our parents' era exactly. We no longer operated out of rivalry. Instead, we existed side by side, each offering something different, something meaningful. As for me, I still walk into my restaurant every morning with gratitude. I greet the staff. I check the ingredients. I adjust the seasoning in the soup. I open the doors myself. I don't rush anymore. I don't avoid the mirror. I don't hear their voices in my head the way I used to. I hear my own. And I know now, without question, that being underestimated does not mean being incapable. That being pushed aside can sometimes push you toward the greatest parts of yourself. That healing doesn't always look like reconciliation. Sometimes it looks like growth. So when I look at the sign outside, glowing softly into the evening light, I feel peace. I built something good. Something real. Something mine. And I know I am no longer the incompetent one. I am exactly who I was meant to be.